They say the death of a child is every parent's worst nightmare. But for me, it wasn't just the pain of losing my daughter that tore me apart. It was the betrayal that followed. A betrayal that I never saw coming. A betrayal that would change everything. I don't know how to begin describing that day. The funeral was everything I feared, and at the same time, it was nothing like I expected. There's no guide for this kind of thing. The sudden, unexpected death of your only child. It felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me, leaving nothing but the cold, hard reality of what had happened. Olivia was only 40. She was full of life, full of promise. Yet here I was, standing at the front of a room full of mourners, looking at her coffin. There was a strange emptiness inside me, like a part of me had been ripped away, never to return. I should have been sobbing uncontrollably, but I couldn't. All I could feel was a hollowness, a void. But there was something else that made this unbearable, something that gnawed at me and made everything worse. Aaron, my son-in-law, was acting like a man who just lost a stranger, not a wife. He barely spoke. His eyes never welled with tears. He wasn't grieving. He was, for lack of a better word, indifferent. At first, I thought maybe it was just the shock of everything. Maybe he was in denial. But as the hours went by, I couldn't shake the unease that kept creeping in. He wasn't even trying to hide it. His focus seemed to be on something else entirely. His phone, his watch, anything but his wife's memory. I stood at the back of the room, watching him, trying to make sense of it. Something was wrong, and I couldn't quite place it. My heart ached for Olivia, but it also ached with confusion and dread about Aaron's behavior. He didn't even seem to care about the people who were here to mourn Olivia. He was cold. Later that evening, after most people had gone home and I was left alone in the quiet of my house, I started to go through some of Olivia's things. Letters, old photos, memories of better times, anything to make the silence less deafening. That's when I found it. A stack of bank statements, with withdrawal receipts marked in red ink. The number that jumped out at me was $300,000, withdrawn from the account I shared with Olivia. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My chest tightened as I reread the figures, trying to make sense of them. That wasn't just a transfer, that was a robbery. And worse still, it had been done in Olivia's name, using her identity to access funds she hadn't authorized. I felt something I couldn't explain. Was it anger? Betrayal? Fear? A mixture of everything. Aaron had taken money from her account just hours after her death, just as we were burying her, and he didn't even have the decency to be discreet about it. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't have any proof beyond the paper in my hand, but it felt like a heavy weight in my chest. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table, trying to make sense of the shock, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, yet urgent. "You need to be careful with Aaron," the voice said. "He's not being honest with you. He's hiding something, and it's bigger than you think." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the phone still pressed to my ear. Whoever had called didn't leave a name, and there was no way to trace the call. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something much darker than I could have ever imagined. What was Aaron hiding? What had he done? I had no answers, only more questions, and as much as I tried to push them aside, the truth was starting to seep through. There was something deeply wrong with the way Aaron had been acting, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. But I didn't know where to start. I had no idea how to begin unraveling this tangled web, especially not with the grief still heavy in my heart. But I knew one thing for sure. There was more to Olivia's death than just an accident, and if Aaron had anything to do with it, I would make sure he paid for what he'd done. The days after Olivia's funeral blurred together in a haze of grief, but something about Aaron's behavior made it impossible for me to focus on anything else. Every time I tried to bring up her financial affairs, or even the simplest details about the insurance policy, he would dodge the subject with a cold, practiced indifference. His words were polite, but there was no warmth in them. It was as if Olivia had never been real to him. He wasn't grieving. He was just going through the motions. I tried to shake it off at first. Grief does strange things to people, and maybe Aaron was just trying to cope in his own way. But I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. My mind kept drifting back to the $300,000 he had taken from our joint account, money that should have been for Olivia's future, for our family. It felt like a betrayal of the highest order, and the way he acted, avoiding the conversation, made me more certain by the day that he was hiding something. That's when I decided to visit Olivia's house. I had to do it, even though I knew it would break me all over again. The house was empty now. Her laughter, her warmth, all gone. The silence was suffocating. I walked through the rooms, my eyes catching on familiar things. Her favorite books stacked on the coffee table, the old photo albums on the shelf, the soft, worn couch where she used to sit. It all felt like a cruel reminder that she wasn't coming back. In Olivia's bedroom, I began going through her things, trying to hold on to something, anything, that might bring her back. And then, in the back of her closet, I found it. A shoebox, old and dusty, tucked away beneath a pile of forgotten clothes. Inside were several letters, handwritten letters to me. As I read through them, my heart sank. Olivia had written about the frustration she felt in her marriage, the ways Aaron had become controlling, distant, and cold over the years. She mentioned how he pressured her to sign documents she didn't fully understand, how he had isolated her from friends and family, convincing her that she couldn't live without him. These were things I had never known. I had always trusted Aaron, always thought of him as part of the family, but reading her words now made me question everything. In one letter, Olivia had written, "I feel trapped, like I'm losing myself. Aaron is changing. I'm not sure I can keep pretending everything is fine." The realization hit me like a physical blow. I had seen signs of their strain, Olivia's tired eyes, the way she avoided certain topics when she came to visit, but I had always brushed them aside. She seemed happy enough on the surface. How could I have missed the depth of her unhappiness? But now, looking at these letters, I began to understand. She had been suffering, and I had no idea how bad it had really gotten. The grief that had already felt unbearable grew even sharper, but alongside it, a new, gnawing feeling began to take root. Suspicion. I wasn't sure what had happened to Olivia, but I began to feel that her death wasn't as simple as an accident. The pieces weren't fitting together. I had to know more. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I didn't even know where to start. What did I need to uncover? What was Aaron hiding? The insurance policy, the bank records, or something deeper, darker that only he knew? I pulled out the financial records I had been gathering and started scribbling notes, making connections between Olivia's last months and the strange withdrawals. Something felt off. Too many accounts had been changed, too many decisions made too quickly. And there was Aaron, always hovering just out of reach, offering nothing but excuses when I tried to get answers. I kept telling myself to be patient, to wait for more information. But I couldn't. I needed answers now. My daughter was dead, and Aaron had already taken enough from her. I couldn't sit back and let him take more. With trembling hands, I wrote down the names of the banks Olivia used. I wrote down the dates of the withdrawals I'd found and the name of the life insurance company that listed Aaron as the sole beneficiary. As each new detail surfaced, my anger built. I couldn't keep quiet. I couldn't let Aaron get away with this. But where would I find the evidence I needed? How would I expose him without putting myself in danger? The questions ran through my mind, louder and more insistent. I felt more determined than ever before. There was something here, something Aaron had hidden, and I was going to find it, no matter what it took. I couldn't trust anyone but myself to get to the truth. I had to dig deeper, and I had to do it alone. Aaron had already proven that he could lie, manipulate, and steal. Now, it was my turn. And as I walked away from Olivia's house, a sense of urgency washed over me. I knew this wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. I couldn't ignore the gnawing suspicion that had taken root inside me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Olivia's lifeless body, the way her hands were stiff in that final photo of her, taken not long before the accident. She hadn't been herself lately, but what if that wasn't all? What if Aaron had something to do with it? I had to know more. The accident site was about an hour's drive from my house. I drove there alone, determined to understand what really happened. As I pulled up to the stretch of highway where Olivia's car had gone off the road, a strange feeling washed over me. The place felt empty, desolate, a few tire marks in the dirt, and the faded outlines of where the car had once been. I met with a couple of old officers who had been at the scene that night. One of them, an older man with graying hair, seemed particularly open to speaking with me. I explained my concerns, how the car didn't seem to have been in motion when it crashed. He listened carefully, and then nodded slowly. "You're not wrong, Diane," he said, his voice low. "The way the car was positioned wasn't typical. Most accidents leave the car at an angle, having spun or slid from the impact. But Olivia's car, it was practically parked in the ditch. It looked like it had come to a stop, but then, that's when the collision happened. That's when a chilling thought crept into my mind. What if she didn't crash at all? What if someone made sure it happened? The officer continued. Also, the seatbelt. It wasn't fastened properly. The latch was open, but the strap wasn't fully pulled across her chest. I felt a lump form in my throat. Olivia had always been so careful, so meticulous. She wouldn't have neglected something like that, not when her life depended on it. Do you think the accident was staged? I asked, my voice shaking. The officer looked uncomfortable, but nodded. I can't say for sure, but something doesn't add up. That's why they'll go back over the evidence. Just don't go jumping to conclusions. I thanked him, feeling both a sense of dread and a twisted relief. Maybe I wasn't imagining things after all. There was something strange about Olivia's death, and I needed to find out what. As I drove back home, I couldn't stop replaying the officer's words in my mind. The car wasn't in motion. The seatbelt wasn't fastened. It didn't seem like an accident anymore. It was as if someone had orchestrated it, controlled it. When I got home, I found Aaron sitting at the kitchen table, looking at his phone. He didn't even glance up when I entered, his fingers moving rapidly over the screen. The room felt thick with tension as I walked toward him, my mind racing with everything I had just learned. Aaron, I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. I went to the scene of the accident. That got his attention. He froze, his fingers stopping mid-swipe. What do you mean, you went to the scene? His voice was casual, but I saw a flicker of unease in his eyes. I spoke to some of the officers. There's something strange about how the crash happened. Aaron's gaze flickered. For a second, I thought I saw fear cross his face, but then it was gone, replaced by that familiar, practiced calm. Diane, you need to stop doing this to yourself. The accident happened. Olivia's gone. We need to move forward. He didn't answer my question. He was deflecting, avoiding. I could feel the tension tightening in my chest, the doubt growing inside me. His coldness was suffocating, and for the first time, I began to wonder, was this all just a plan? You're avoiding the truth, Aaron, I said, my voice harder than I intended. You're not grieving. You're avoiding it, and now you're trying to make me forget about what happened to Olivia. Aaron's jaw clenched. He stood up, his body tense, but he didn't raise his voice. I'm not trying to control anything. I'm just trying to get through this the best I can, and you should too. I stood my ground. I'm going to find out what really happened, and when I do, I'll make sure you don't get away with this. His face hardened. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then he shook his head. You're not thinking straight. Just drop it, Diane. You're only going to hurt yourself more. He left the room, his footsteps heavy. My heart pounded in my chest, but it was no longer fear I felt. It was fury. The more he tried to shut me down, the more I knew I was on the right path. That night, I began to dig deeper. I pulled out Olivia's bank records, looking for anything out of place. And there it was, transaction after transaction, ones that weren't made by her. There were large sums of money transferred to an account under Aaron's name, payments to a mysterious vendor I didn't recognize. And then there were the loans, the ones that Olivia had never mentioned to me. Every single thing pointed to one conclusion. Aaron had been hiding something, and I was just beginning to scratch the surface. I felt the urgency again, the need to uncover the truth. I had to figure out what was really happening here before Aaron closed in on me, silencing me the way he had silenced Olivia. I made a note of the transactions, marking down everything I didn't understand, and then my eyes fell on the insurance policy. I hadn't looked at it yet, but now it seemed crucial. Aaron was listed as the sole beneficiary, but what if it wasn't just the money he wanted? What if he'd wanted something more from Olivia? My suspicions were beginning to coalesce into something darker, but there was still so much I didn't know. I had to dig deeper. I had to find every piece of the puzzle. I just couldn't let Aaron get away with it. The weight of everything was starting to feel unbearable. The truth was out there. I could feel it, but it was slipping through my fingers with every passing day. I needed something concrete, something I could hold on to. I called a lawyer, someone who could help me navigate this mess. I needed guidance, someone who could put the pieces together for me. After reviewing the financial records and discussing everything I had uncovered, the lawyer's face turned serious. Diane, he said, his voice low and measured, I think you have a case. You're right to be suspicious of Aaron. But if you're going to confront him, we need to be prepared. He recommended we approach Aaron carefully, but it was clear from his expression that he thought Aaron's actions were no accident. That realization hit me hard. I wasn't just looking at a grieving widower who had lost his wife. I was looking at someone who had orchestrated something far worse. The plan was simple. I would sit down with Aaron, confront him about the missing $300,000, and see how he responded. With the lawyer's advice, I started gathering more documents, more proof, more everything. I had to be certain. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I walked into the living room where Aaron was sitting. He looked up at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. He hadn't said much to me in the last few days, but his presence in the house was like a shadow hanging over me. "Aaron," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, "I need to talk to you about the $300,000 that was withdrawn from our joint account." His reaction was instant. He tensed up, his jaw clenching as his eyes shot up to meet mine. "What the hell are you talking about, Diane? You're acting crazy. The money is mine now. Olivia's dead. It's over. We need to move on." I could feel the anger rise in me, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Aaron, you don't get to decide what's over, not when you've been hiding things from me. Not when you're trying to keep me in the dark about what really happened to Olivia." His face twisted, and his voice rose. "You're being irrational. Olivia's dead, Diane. We have to move on with our lives. You're just making this harder for everyone." I stepped closer, keeping my voice low but firm. "What I'm making harder is your lies, Aaron. You think I'm just going to forget that money, that $300,000 you took from our account? No, I'm not forgetting, and I'm not going to let you manipulate me." He stood up abruptly, backing away from me. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Olivia and I had a plan, and it's none of your business anymore." His words hit me like a slap to the face. "A plan? What plan? You've been lying to me. Aaron?" I said, my voice shaking but resolute. "You're hiding something, and I'm going to find out what it is." He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "I don't need to explain myself to you. I don't owe you anything." His words were cutting, but they only strengthened my resolve. The lies, the coldness, it was all part of something far darker than I had imagined. Later that day, I did what I had to do. I dug deeper into Aaron's past. What I found made my stomach turn. There were multiple loans in his name, huge amounts of money, all unpaid. The stress of debt was written all over the records, but more troubling was the number of times Aaron had used falsified documents to cover up his failures. It wasn't just negligence, it was deliberate. He had lied and forged documents for years, getting himself deeper into debt with every passing month. I called the bank, I called the creditors, I pieced it all together. And the more I found, the more I understood just how deep his lies ran. Aaron wasn't just an opportunist. He was someone who had manipulated everyone around him, including Olivia. But it didn't stop there. I started speaking to some of Olivia's closest friends, people I had trusted for years, and that's when I learned the truth I had never expected. Olivia had been planning to leave Aaron. Weeks before the accident, Olivia had confided in her closest friends that she was finally making plans to leave him. She was going to take control of her life again. She was going to leave the man who had slowly suffocated her spirit, but she never got the chance. One friend in particular, someone who had been a part of their life for years, told me that Olivia had spoken about her fear of Aaron. She was afraid that he would never let her go. The friend even mentioned that Olivia had been looking at apartments, planning her exit strategy in secret. I was shocked, my heart breaking for the daughter I had known, my strong, determined girl who had been trapped in a marriage she didn't deserve. But it all made sense now. The signs I had missed, the behavior I had overlooked. Olivia hadn't just been a victim of circumstance. She had been a victim of Aaron. The more I dug into the past, the more I realized that the crash wasn't an accident. It had been planned, an elaborate way for Aaron to get what he wanted. Aaron had seen her as a way to escape his mounting debts, to start over with a clean slate. He had taken everything from her, including her life. I couldn't shake the image of her sitting in the car, trapped, unable to escape. I began to wonder, was the crash orchestrated to make it look like a mistake? Was that what Aaron wanted? To take Olivia's life, secure the money, and finally be free? But there was no way I could let him get away with it. I had the truth now, and I wasn't backing down. The pieces were falling into place, and I knew exactly what I had to do next. Aaron was going to pay for what he had done, and I was going to make sure of it. I had to know more. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how little I truly knew about Olivia's life in the months leading up to her death. There were so many things left unsaid, so many pieces of her story that didn't make sense, and I wasn't going to rest until I put everything together. The breakthrough came when I reached out to an old friend of Olivia's from childhood, Jenna. She had known Olivia longer than anyone else, and I knew she would have insight into what had really been going on in Olivia's life, especially with Aaron. When Jenna agreed to meet, I could tell right away that something in her demeanor had changed since Olivia's passing. She was nervous, fidgeting with the hem of her sweater as she sat across from me in the coffee shop. But I could see the pain in her eyes when she spoke about Olivia. "I didn't want to believe it, Diane," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. But Olivia was really struggling. Aaron had a way of controlling everything. She was too afraid to leave him, even though she knew it was what she needed. I don't know how it started, but over time, he got more and more possessive. My heart sank as I listened to her. Jenna told me about the changes in Olivia's behavior, how she had stopped going out with friends, stopped calling as much, and how she'd often cancel plans at the last minute. The controlling side of Aaron was something Jenna had seen firsthand. "Olivia tried to leave him once," Jenna said, her eyes tearing up. "She was planning to, but when she told him she wanted a break, Aaron lost it. He didn't just get angry, Diane. He scared her. She told me she felt trapped." I sat back, shocked and broken-hearted. How had Olivia felt so alone? How had I not seen it? The picture was becoming clearer, but the pain of knowing that Olivia had been trapped in a relationship she felt powerless to escape was unbearable. The worst part was hearing that Olivia had been so close to leaving, so close to freeing herself from the prison Aaron had built around her, only to be silenced forever. But there was more. As I gathered myself, I realized that I needed to find out more about Olivia's financial situation. I had already uncovered signs of Aaron's manipulation, but I hadn't yet explored all the details. I started to look into the bank accounts that Olivia had used. What I found made my blood run cold. Several of her accounts had been changed in the months before her death. Accounts she had set up with me as a joint holder were suddenly altered, and Aaron had access to them. I called the bank, trying to hide my anxiety behind calm questions. The manager hesitated before telling me that there had been a series of transactions made from Olivia's account, each one larger than the last. Some of them had been transferred to Aaron's name, and as I dug deeper, I discovered something worse. There were withdrawals made from the account that appeared to have been forged. I could hardly breathe as the truth began to take form. The man I had trusted, the man I had treated like family, had been taking Olivia's money without her consent. But this was more than just theft. It was betrayal. He had manipulated Olivia into giving him control, forging her name, and taking what didn't belong to him. The bank manager also confirmed what I already feared. Aaron had gained access to the life insurance policy Olivia had taken out years ago. And guess who was the sole beneficiary? Aaron. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control. It was about a man who had orchestrated everything to secure his future, and Olivia's death had been his ticket. I could barely contain my rage. How could he do this? How could he kill his own wife, the woman he was supposed to love, just to escape his debts and secure a life of luxury? The more I uncovered, the more I realized the extent of his manipulation. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let him walk away with everything. My heart broke as I thought of Olivia, how she had trusted him, how she had loved him, and yet he had taken everything from her, including her life. I had to find a way to expose him, to make sure he paid for what he had done. As I sat there, staring at the paperwork, a sense of urgency consumed me. The pieces were all there, scattered in front of me, but they needed to be put together. And I needed to do it before Aaron could destroy any more of Olivia's legacy. I wasn't going to rest until I uncovered every last secret Aaron had buried. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice, for Olivia, for the woman who had suffered in silence, and for the life she could never get back. I was no longer content with keeping everything to myself. The weight of my discoveries was suffocating, and I needed someone else to know the truth. I needed to share what I had found, to let others see what Aaron had done, not just to Olivia, but to all of us. I started with the family, the closest relatives, the ones who had known Aaron almost as long as I had. I gathered them one evening, hoping for support, for someone to stand with me. I tried to explain everything, the missing money, the forged documents, the life insurance policy, but their reactions were not what I expected. Some of them, particularly Aaron's side of the family, dismissed it. "You're exaggerating, Diane. Aaron's been under a lot of stress. You're grieving, and sometimes you just start seeing things that aren't there." Their words stung. They didn't understand. They didn't want to understand, but I couldn't back down. I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't seeing things. I was uncovering the truth, no matter how hard it was to face. A few family members did seem concerned, though. One cousin of mine, who had always been close with Olivia, asked to see the bank statements. She was quiet as she looked over everything, and I could see the concern in her eyes as she scanned the details. "This is bad, Diane. Really bad," she said quietly, almost to herself. But even she wasn't ready to go up against Aaron. I was on my own in this. The family wasn't going to help me. If I was going to get justice for Olivia, I'd have to do it myself. The tension hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. I couldn't just sit back anymore, pretending that everything was going to be fine. Aaron had stolen from Olivia, and the more I learned, the more I realized that he had been planning this for a long time. That night, after dinner, I received an anonymous phone call. The voice on the other end was quiet, almost a whisper, as if they were afraid to be heard. "Aaron's been in trouble with the law before," the voice said. "Fraud, embezzlement, he's done it all. He's good at hiding it, but the truth's out there." The words hit me like a punch. I had suspected Aaron was hiding things, but this confirmation, the fact that he had a history of fraud, pushed me over the edge. I had to find out more. I couldn't do this alone anymore. The next day, I hired a private investigator. I couldn't trust anyone else. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. The detective I hired was professional and no nonsense. He dug into Aaron's past, looking for any sign of financial misconduct, and what he found confirmed my worst fears. Aaron wasn't just a man who had stolen from his wife. He was a serial manipulator. The detective uncovered several instances of Aaron being involved in fraudulent activities over the years, from falsifying documents to embezzling money. It seemed like it was second nature to him. The more I learned, the more I realized that his entire life had been one big lie. But the most shocking discovery came next. Aaron had been trying to sell Olivia's house, the house she had poured so much love into, the house they had shared. He was preparing to sell it, which would have netted him a significant profit, far more than the $300,000 he had already stolen. It was clear now. Aaron wasn't just looking to get out of debt. He was setting himself up for a new life. He was trying to erase everything about Olivia and start fresh. My blood ran cold as I thought about how he had manipulated her, how he had manipulated all of us. He had been planning this for a long time, and I was just beginning to scratch the surface. But there was still more. The investigator found evidence that Aaron had been in contact with a divorce lawyer and a specialist in estate planning. It was clear he had been preparing for Olivia's death long before the accident. He had been working on securing his financial future, as if he knew what was coming. Everything was starting to fall into place. Aaron had orchestrated everything, from the way Olivia's death had been handled to the way he had positioned himself as the sole beneficiary of her life insurance. He wasn't just a grieving widower. He was a man who had carefully calculated every move, every lie, every step. The more I uncovered, the more determined I became to confront him. But I couldn't do it yet. I needed more proof. I needed to make sure I had everything I needed before I went to the police or anyone else. I couldn't let Aaron get away with this. I had already seen too much, and the pain in my heart was now mixed with a fierce, burning rage. He had taken Olivia from me, from all of us, and I wasn't going to let him destroy her memory without paying for what he had done. I was close now, so close, but I had to be careful. I couldn't let Aaron know what I was up to. Not yet. I had to stay one step ahead. The investigation was no longer a passive search for answers. It had become a carefully orchestrated pursuit, a pursuit that I would see through to the end, no matter what it took. With the help of the private investigator, I had started piecing together Aaron's every move. His actions were starting to tell a much darker story, one that I couldn't ignore any longer. The most damning evidence came when the detective uncovered a critical detail. Aaron had been in contact with Olivia's life insurance company on the very same day of the accident. I felt a chill creep up my spine as the implications of that discovery hit me. How could he have known? Why would he be reaching out to the insurance company at that precise moment, if not for one reason, to make sure the policy payout was secured? Everything that had been swirling in my mind for days now had a horrifying clarity. Aaron had been planning this, perhaps even before the accident happened. He had been preparing for Olivia's death long before it became a reality. The timing was no coincidence. I had gathered the pieces, the phone records, the insurance papers, the bank statements, and I knew I was ready.